So, you want to play Season of Ghosts. Hello and welcome back to Podfinder. My name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Today's video is another video player's guide, this time focusing on one of Paizo's most well-received adventure paths, Season of Ghosts. For those unfamiliar with my player's guides, this video will provide a brief overview of the structure and themes of the campaign, while remaining light on spoilers. I'll provide a rundown of the setting and the lore leading up to the campaign, then dig into some mechanical options players can select to have a thematic connection to the story, including ancestries, classes, and religious options. With that out of the way, let's start with the campaign overview. First things first, Season of Ghosts is by far the most spoilable Pathfinder AP I've ever read, and I don't say that to be hyperbolic. This AP is built upon a series of mysteries and plot twists which can be spoiled very easily. Your enjoyment of this AP could be seriously impacted if you don't take care to avoid spoilers. If you are considering playing this AP, I strongly suggest not reading too much into it unless you've talked with your GM and they've approved the sources you want to read. And that includes the Player's Guide and the Tiansha World Guide. For that reason, I'm being even more careful than normal to avoid spoilers in this video. And for the record, if you want another video to watch to get another take on this campaign, How It's Played has a great spoiler-free video on the subject. Alright, back on track. Season of Ghosts is a 4-part adventure path, which takes player characters from 1st level through 12th level. It is the 14th adventure path which Paizo has produced for 2nd edition, covering books 196 through 199 in the Adventure Path product line. If you watch this video and decide this AP might be right for your group, I suggest working with your GM to develop your character, but maybe don't read the player's guide without their permission, since there might be some points they want to obscure in that PDF. I've linked the player's guide in the description, but again, talk to your GM before reading it. To be clear, I don't think it's too spoilery for my players, but your GM might disagree. This campaign is Paizo's first ever 4-part AP, and that is very much a deliberate choice on the part of the writers. Season of Ghosts follows the story of the small town of Willowshore as it experiences a full calendar year. Each of the 4 books follows the town through one of the 4 seasons, starting in summer, then progressing through fall and winter before concluding in spring. The 4 seasons and the steady passage of time are a constant theme throughout the campaign. Festivals and ceremonies of all kinds mark important events, both in the story and in the day-to-day lives of the citizens of Willowshore. And indeed, the story kicks off immediately after an important celebration called the Reenactment Festival, which I will discuss in a bit more detail later on. The PCs, as natives of Willowshore, or at least very long-time residents of the town, are participating in the festivities, much as they would any other festival or traditional celebration which occurs in Willowshore every year. Of course, following daily life in a small town for a full year wouldn't be terribly interesting at the table if nothing exciting were to happen, and this is where Season of Ghosts really shines. Throughout the campaign, Willowshore will be subjected to a number of mysterious, haunting, and unexplained events which place the PCs and the citizens of the town in significant danger. These events are rarely, if ever, straightforward, and the broader story is structured as a complex and multi-layered mystery. The story benefits significantly from a slow-building sense of tension and dread which only breaks in periodic and explosive acts of horror and sometimes violence. Part of what contributes to this slow burn is the lasting presence of downtime in the campaign. PCs are expected to participate in the day-to-day life of Willowshore's citizens, and immerse themselves in the lives of the NPCs who live in the small town. Downtime activities can be a great way for PCs to engage with the townsfolk and further connect themselves to the setting. Additionally, many challenges the story presents are faced not only by the PCs, but by the town as a whole, and by working with their fellow townsfolk on the days between conventional adventuring activities, the PCs can meaningfully increase the town's chances of success. I want to conclude this section by properly setting player expectations regarding the challenges they will face in this story. Season of Ghosts is an absolutely phenomenal AP from a narrative standpoint. It places substantial emphasis on social, performative, and non-combat challenges, which allows players to engage in the central plot in an exceptionally deep way. To put it another way, this AP really puts the RP into TTRPG. As a result, the combat portions of this AP are less emphasized, and are a bit easier than experienced Pathfinder players might be used to. PCs who want to engage with this story should emphasize character over character sheet, taking time to engage narratively rather than mechanically with the plot. A good way to think of Season of Ghosts might be to contrast it with another famous AP, Abomination Vaults. Both campaigns are set in small towns and follow the PCs as they deal with threats which endanger those communities. Both campaigns tell a rich and interesting story, but the way they go about it is entirely different. Abomination Vaults is fundamentally a dungeon crawl. It tells its story through combat and small-scale exploration. Season of Ghosts is a much more complex narrative, and tells its story through social encounters, civic engagement, and careful investigation. Both are great, but they are very different. Before you start this AP, consider if a narrative-heavy and combat-light AP is right for your group. Normally, I would separate the setting and background lore sections, but Willowshore as a town is defined so much by its history that the two are very hard to separate. So I'll start this section with a review of the history of the region and the important events which made Willowshore what it is, then conclude by covering Willowshore as it exists at the start of the campaign. This campaign is set in Tian Sha, the continent on the opposite side of Galarian from the Inner Sea region, and the continent which serves as Pathfinder's analog for East Asia. Specifically, this story is set in Shenmen, a nation at the center of Tian Sha, sandwiched between the Sea of Ghosts in the east and the Gossamer Mountains in the west. Despite its central location on Tian Sha, Shenmen isn't particularly heavily populated, or seen as a primary trade route for north-south merchants. Instead, it is often seen as a backwater, and its people are generally organized into small, isolated agricultural villages. The reason for this is simple. Shenmen is a land haunted by restless spirits. Ghosts and the unquiet dead stalk the land with alarming regularity. The roads of Shenmen are plagued by the undead and by malevolent spirits, making life difficult even for powerful and well-connected individuals. The skies of Shenmen are constantly overcast, and storms are common, resulting in rich and irrigated land well-suited for agriculture and lumber harvesting. This has allowed a small population of citizens to carve out a harsh but stable life for themselves in farming and lumber towns throughout the region. The people of these towns cloak themselves in faith and superstition, beliefs which generally protect them from the myriad dangers which stalk the lands outside their village walls. Years in Shenmen are marked by the passage of the seasons, each of which in turn is marked by various festivals of celebration or ceremonies of protection. Spring in Shenmen is a time for planting, though much of this planting is held off until the days lengthen. As the long nights of winter shorten, the danger posed by the undead decreases, as most of them abhor the sunlight. The spring equinox, the day when the days become longer than the nights, is viewed as exceptionally important, and most citizens celebrate by weaving the Tsukiyo lotus flower into their hair. Summer, with its long days, is seen as the safest of the four seasons in Shenmen. Citizens spend their days tending their fields and harvesting timber as quickly as possible without angering local spirits. The mood in summer is relatively light, and people are generally friendlier than in other seasons. Autumn heralds the return of the long nights to Shenmen, and the people of the region spend their days preparing for the challenges ahead. They stockpile food and supplies, pickling foods for winter and preparing equipment for dealing with restless spirits. The fall equinox, called the First Long Night, is a somber event where citizens reflect on their lives. They seek blessings from their village sages and center their spirits for the dangers to come. Winter in Shenmen is a time of danger. In addition to the conventional threats posed by the weather, storms, starvation, hypothermia, the long nights allow the restless dead to wander the land with greater impunity. Villagers rarely leave the walls of their towns during these months, as the forests and even the roads are full of peril. Shenmen was, until very recently at the time of the campaign, under the control of Lunghua, a nearly continent-spanning empire which reigned over central Tiansha for almost 500 years. Lunghua treated Shenmen like a backwater, a place from which they could extract natural resources and to which they could send their privileged nobility to engage in sport hunting. Lunghua exported its militaristic management style to Shenmen, resulting in a mixing of their production-minded culture with the local focus on tradition. This culture shock eventually even extended to small out-of-the-way towns like Willowshore. And that takes us to Willowshore itself, the actual setting for the Season of Ghosts adventure path. The first notable event in the history of the region where Willowshore would be founded actually occurred in the year 6223 IC, more than 200 years before the founding of Lunghua. At this time, a powerful adventurer named Tan Sui Jing faced off against and defeated the terrible fiend Kugapti. Tan Sui Jing herself died in this battle, but her body was transformed into a beautiful tree imbued with magical power called the Tan Sugi tree. Centuries later, in 7020 IC, a monk named Ji Hui made her way to the site and rediscovered the Tan Sugi tree. Feeling inspired by the immense spiritual might of the tree, Ji Hui chose to establish a monastery at the site. Ji Hui was a practitioner of Sangpochi, an ancient philosophy which examines the cycle of reincarnation which some souls experience before entering the River of Souls for judgment. The monk proved successful in her efforts and raised funds to construct a temple where students of Sangpochi could meditate and learn in peace. The site of the new temple was exceptionally remote, however, and workers were loath to frequently make the hard journey upriver with supplies. To support the construction efforts, a settlement began to form on the banks of the Saber River, where supplies could be dropped off with regularity and picked up as needed by the laborers. This settlement was jokingly called the Shore of Willows, in reference to a local expression which meant hard to find. This descriptor slowly stuck, however, in part because the town was actually located on a shore filled with willow trees, and over time the town took on the name Willowshore. After the completion of the temple, Willowshore remained, and the denizens took up livelihoods as farmers or woodcutters in the hinterlands around the town proper. Though the town was never really prosperous, it experienced a constant flow of monks and pilgrims seeking the Tan Sugi Monastery. The walk from the town to the monastery was even dubbed the Pilgrim's Path. As the town continued to grow, it soon became large enough to be recognized as an official settlement by the governing authority in Shenmen. This required the town to construct a lantern, one which would always remain tended and lit, and which would signify that the town was a safe place, not suitable for spirits or monsters. Ji Hui sought to repay the people of the town for their support and kindness, and descended from the Tan Sugi Monastery. She found a carved stone lantern at the end of the Dawn Step Bridge at the center of town, then placed 3 copper coins inside. The coins began to glow like the light of a torch, and thus the eternal lantern was lit. This lantern still burns in Willowshore to this day, signaling the safety of the town against the dangers which haunt the surrounding woods. Of course, all good things come to an end. In 7054 IC, Ji Hui passed away, presumably to reincarnate elsewhere on Tiansha and begin her journey anew. This left the monks of the Tan Sugi Monastery leaderless, and they soon fell to infighting. Within a few years, the monastery had been completely abandoned, and the town lost its flow of pilgrims as a source for revenue. Still, the years wore on. Willowshore attracted the attention of the upper levels of Lunghwa's bureaucracy, and was chosen to be incorporated into the empire's ever-growing lumber trade. In 7060, Lunghwa began sending new settlers to the town, so lumber harvesting in the region might be expanded. While things began amicably, tensions in the town slowly grew, as officials from Lunghwa became increasingly exploitative and demanded higher and higher lumber yields. This all came to a head in 7062, when the leader of a lumber company, the son of Lady Cho Mingxia, the city lord of the nearby city of Zhe, led his men to the Tansugi Monastery to harvest the sacred trees within. This act of attempted desecration proved to be a fatal mistake. The lumberjacks were slaughtered, nearly to a man, and their blades and tools were shattered by some unseen force. The corpses of the deceased were then raised by that same force and returned to the town to seek vengeance on the townsfolk. These corpses were defeated, but the event, now called the Night of Broken Blades, still lives on in the memories of the townsfolk. To this day, the Tansugi Monastery is considered dangerous and haunted, not a place to be trifled with. Not long after this event, the administrators of Lunghwa finally recognized the dangers which towns like Willowshore faced in Shenmen. They put out the call for soldiers to move to the town and take up residence. These soldiers would be provided with land and a home in exchange for their labor and the defense they could provide the town in case of an emergency. In addition to the soldiers, the administrators from Lunghwa saw fit to order the construction of a second town lantern to further protect the community. One of the aristocrats from Lunghwa took the opportunity to offer a huge stone guardian spider to the town, free of charge. This statue was inhabited by a powerful guardian spirit who would rise to defend the town in times of danger, and would hold the new lantern in its jaws. The residents of Willowshore unanimously agreed that the spider was hideously ugly, but dared not turn the gift away out of respect for the protection a stone guardian spider could provide. In time, the locals grew a certain affection for the statue, taking it on as an unofficial mascot for the town, and naming it Ugly Cute, since they had all grown accustomed to its frightful appearance. These combined efforts, the presence of new soldiers and the presence of Ugly Cute, brought stability to Willowshore, and the people slowly carved out a new normal for themselves. This was the way of things in Willowshore for over 40 years. In 7102, the town received a new governor, a man named He Shanbao, who was appointed by Lunghwa. This had little impact on day-to-day life, however, and it seemed that things in Willowshore would never change. Then, in 7106, the Lunghwa Empire collapsed. The empire shattered almost overnight, stressed by a series of natural disasters and weakened by centuries of bureaucratic rot. Major imperial centers were hit hard, and the local governors of Shenmen were completely cut off from their support structures. He Shanbao managed to shield the people of Willowshore from the worst of these effects, however, and the town's remoteness only helped in that regard. That takes us to the present day, 7108 IC, 2 years after the collapse of Imperial Lunghwa. Willowshore remains much as it has for the past 40-odd years, a small, out-of-the-way lumber town which is mostly self-sufficient. The town has drifted a long way from its roots as a Songpochi pilgrimage site, but it still maintains a small-town feel. The local rumor mill is currently buzzing with hushed murmurs of the strange Jorogumo, monstrous creatures who are supposedly making a play for the control of Shenmen. Even so, these are mostly just rumors, brought into town by the traders last fall and almost certainly months out of date. Willowshore boasts a population of 225 citizens. These are mostly humans of mixed Tian ethnicity. That said, a few families of elves or Ayuvarin from nearby Jinan have taken up residence over the years, as have some Tengu from Kwanlai to the east. Several Nagaji have drifted north from Nagajor, while more than a few Kitsune have wandered in from neighboring Songbai. Additionally, several halflings and even a few Taldan humans have made their way south from Amanandar. There are even a few Isoki and Leshis who've made their homes in town. Despite this diversity, most Willowshorans see themselves as just that, citizens of the town first and foremost. They are known to stick together in the face of adversity, and generally put aside their differences so they might overcome shared challenges. Still, no small town is complete without its divisions, and Willowshore is no exception. The town is divided politically into two camps: the traditionalist Southbankers and the industrialist Northridgers. Southbankers are typically the descendants of the first wave of settlers to the region, those who came to the town to support the construction of the Tansugi Monastery. These original settlers built their homes on the southern bank of the Saber River, and their descendants tend to have a traditionalist worldview, with a deep respect for history and convention. Northridgers, by contrast, are typically the descendants of the second wave of settlers, those brought in by Longhua 40 years ago to aid in the harvesting of lumber or to increase the security of the town. These settlers typically built their homes on the northern bank of the Saber River, a steep wooded ridge called Northridge. Their descendants typically have a more urban mindset and think in terms of civic development and economic progress. The leaders of these two factions are generally agreed to be Old Matsuki for the Southbankers and Granny Hu for the Northridgers. Old Matsuki is a retired carpenter who was once apprenticed to the head carpenter for the Tansugi Monastery before it was abandoned. He is a staunch traditionalist, but is generally well respected for his wisdom and work ethic. Granny Hu is the retired captain of the town guard. She is recognized even by her rivals as tactically minded and tough as nails, and her love for her family is well known. As the campaign begins, the town of Willowshore is about to participate in its reenactment festival on the first day of summer. This festival plays an important role in the town's spiritual defense, especially against the oncoming threat of the Season of Ghosts. The Season of Ghosts is a length of time in the summer when the woods around the town become increasingly active with spirits who lure travelers to their deaths. To make Willowshore safe, the town holds the Reenactment Festival, a celebration where townsfolk dress up as ghosts and spirits and stage a performative kidnapping of elected townsfolk. These victims, who are all willing participants, are taken away into the woods and bound in straw mats for the night until being rescued in the morning. The villagers then act out a performance of misery and grief, lamenting the loss of their friends and relatives who were taken by ghosts. This is all an act, intended for the local spirits in the hinterlands surrounding Willowshore. The intent is to convince the spirits in the area that Willowshore is already haunted and miserable, and that other towns might be far happier targets for haunting. Though the festival serves a very real purpose, it is generally considered a light-hearted and raucous affair by many of the townsfolk. If you build your PC using the campaign backgrounds presented in the Player's Guide, each background provides a motivation for your PC to be a volunteer kidnapping victim in the celebration. I'll be covering each of these backgrounds at the end of this video. Finally, I want to address the topic of superstition. In a land like Shenmen, where haunts and spirits are a very real and frequent danger, many traditions have arisen around the practice of warding off ghosts and malevolent spirits. 8 specific practices have developed in Willowshore, which citizens employ to protect themselves. These are, in no particular order: do not call a ghost, do not pat people on the head or shoulders, avoid entering bodies of water when a ghost is nearby, do not eat food that has 2 stick-like objects protruding from it, do not lean against walls during the day, do not whistle at night, do not leave laundry out at night, and if you hear someone call your name from behind you at night, do not turn around. I suggest players in this AP familiarize themselves with these rules, and incorporate a few of them into their character's behavior to add to the authenticity of the story. Alright, time to dig into some player-facing information which you can use to build your characters for Season of Ghosts. First and foremost, the PCs should all be either natives to Willowshore or long-term residents who grew up in and around the town. As such, players should choose from the ancestries who make their homes in the town. Luckily, this still presents players with a wide variety of options. As mentioned earlier, humans are the most numerous of the citizens of Willowshore, and account for over 80% of the population. The humans of Willowshore are of mixed Tian ethnicity, with individuals of Tian Min, Tian Shu, and Tian Dan heritage all present in the town. There are also several humans of Taldan descent in the town, who migrated south from Amanandar. Many non-humans have also migrated to the town over the years, from neighboring or nearby nations. These include Elves and Ayuvarin from Jinin, Tengu from Quan Lai, Kitsune from Songbai, and Nagaji from Nagajor. There are also a few halflings from Amanandar. Traditionally, there have been no hobgoblins in the town, but it's possible that one or two might have migrated over from Kowloon in recent years, though, again, the campaign expects that PCs have spent substantial time in Willowshore. There are also a small number of Isoki, or ratfolk, who've made their homes in Willowshore over the years, though they number no more than a half dozen or so at most. The town also plays host to a small number of leshies. These plant folk might have once been native to the region, but were slowly absorbed into the town as it expanded over the years. Somewhat famously, the Leshy's Saloon in town produces a wide variety of teas to serve hardworking villagers. I should also mention that Season of Ghosts released well before the new Tiansha Character Guide and World Guide books were available. Those books have stated that the Yaoguai and Weiyang ancestries have a notable presence in Shenmen as well, and so it's entirely possible that several of these peoples might have found their way to Willowshore. Before I talk about classes which players might consider, I want to reiterate that this AP places a much greater emphasis on non-combat encounters and narrative challenges than past Pathfinder adventures. As a result, combat encounters are a bit easier in this AP than experienced players might be used to. Combat can still be a challenge in places, but I would encourage players to focus on skills and narrative or thematic depth when crafting their characters, before they focus on combat prowess. You'll still want characters who can hold their own in a fight, since this AP benefits from a constant party lineup throughout, but you shouldn't need a min-maxed combat powerhouse to excel in the story. To that end, I'm stepping away from my usual frontliner, support, caster breakdown in terms of class discussions. Instead, I'll break my discussion down by mental ability score, since that will allow me to be the most concise and straightforward. For characters defined by their intelligence, quite a few options stand out. First and foremost, these characters will want to put some focus on the Willowshore lore skill. While a wide variety of lore skills can be helpful in this campaign, from tea lore to midwifery, Willowshore lore is far and away the most useful lore skill. PCs could also benefit from taking the additional lore feat after they've become immersed in the story, since new areas of study might reveal themselves to be important as events unfold. The Lore Master archetype could actually go a long way in this campaign toward helping a party cover the wide variety of lore skills which are relevant to the plot. Outside of lore, the crafting skill has a lot of opportunities to shine in this campaign, due to the prevalence of downtime throughout the story. In terms of knowledge skills, Arcana and Occultism are less important in the early books, but come into their own in the back half of the story. By contrast, Society is important throughout the entire campaign, and is certainly worthy of some investment. The Investigator is the standout int-based marshal in this campaign. The structure of this story, as a continuously unfolding mystery, plays right into the Investigator's themes and specialties, making them a great class choice. The Forensic Medicine and Alchemical Sciences methodologies are the best choices of subclass here. On the caster side of things, the Witch is the best fit thematically. The plot of this AP focuses on curses of unknown origin, and the Witch fits that theme nicely. Spiders make a great choice of familiar here, and the Resentment, Silence in the Snow, Spinner of Threads, and Wilding Steward are all great choices of patron. Wisdom-based characters have a number of ways to stand out in the campaign. first and foremost by focusing on the nature and religion skills. These are, far and away, the best of the 4 magical knowledge skills in the early books of the campaign, and will remain relevant throughout. At the same time, the survival skill can do a lot of work helping the party navigate the forests surrounding Willowshore, something they will need to do with relative frequency. The Ranger will naturally excel at these skills, and is a great choice for this campaign. Normally, I would suggest the Precision Ranger, but precision damage immunity is common enough among the enemies in this campaign that I don't think I can do that. Instead, Season of Ghosts is actually the rare opportunity for the Outwit Ranger to shine, especially if they choose to specialize in forested terrain. If you don't feel like playing a Ranger, the Monk is a similarly good choice, especially with Willowshore's history as a town founded to support a monastery. There aren't any monk stances that stand out as especially good choices for this campaign, but an emphasis on living in harmony with nature and spirits would be a great way to lean into the themes of the story. In terms of casters, druids are the standout, and the leaf, animal, storm, or untamed orders could all do well here. I always recommend the medic or herbalist archetypes to help keep the party alive, and this campaign is no exception. The Horizon Walker is a good pick as well, especially if the party doesn't have a ranger. For players who want to focus on charisma, there are a ton of great options and ways to contribute to the story. The face skills are all important, but diplomacy is by far the king in this campaign. The many social challenges the party will face in this campaign often necessitate a diplomatic approach. Deception and intimidation will have their moments, however, and even performance can be a good option from time to time. The Thaumaturge is definitely the best martial pick for charisma characters, as the themes of esoteric mysteries and unexplained magic fit right into the class's wheelhouse. Also, this campaign is the rare chance for the Lantern implement to thematically shine, no pun intended, since the town of Willowshore plays host to the Eternal Lantern. On the caster end of the spectrum, both the Oracle and the Sorcerer could work nicely. Oracles will connect to the curse themes of the story, and most mysteries outside of battle or flames are a good choice. The pervasive magic in Shenmen could give rise to quite a few sorcerers, and the Imperial or Psychopomp bloodlines fit the campaign well. The Bard also has a great opportunity to stand out in this campaign, as the emphasis on social skills fits their natural skill set nicely. The Enigma and Polymath muses will perform well, while the Battle muse might struggle. Right between the marshals and casters is the Summoner, and summoners with the Phantom or Psychopomp Eidolons are a great choice, though the Plant or Beast Eidolons are solid picks as well. The Blessed One archetype is a good choice for characters in this campaign, especially if your party is in need of additional healing, and if your character interprets their blessing as having come from one of the thematic deities or faiths in Willowshore. Finally, I have a few additional recommendations that don't fit with my earlier points. If you are determined to play a marshal who doesn't lean hard into skills, there are a few classes which might be good options. The Spirit Instinct Barbarian could connect nicely with the themes of discontented spirits, and has a natural advantage in its ability to deal with incorporeal foes with relative ease. The Champion is a solid choice as well, especially if they follow a thematic deity. And of course, the Kineticist could perform well here, especially if the character in question leans into the monastic Last Airbender feel of the class. Just remember that air is not considered one of the 5 elements in Tian Sha, and metal might be a bit off-theme for this AP. All of these classes could perform well if the character in question sees themselves as a guardian of the town of Willowshore. The Martial Artist archetype is a great choice for characters who want to lean into a monk aesthetic, but not express a more monastic lifestyle. In terms of skills, athletics can be very important to this campaign, especially outside of combat and during downtime activities. Thievery also has its moments of prominence, but they are a bit less frequent. Last but not least, the Ritualist archetype can be quite helpful in this AP, as rituals play a significant role in the story. The Ritualist archetype can go a long way toward helping a party perform these rituals well, especially if said party doesn't have a good grasp of the main 4 magical skills. Faith and religion can go a long way toward helping your character connect to the themes of the story and life in the town of Willowshore. The citizens of Willowshore put a lot of stock into both superstition and faith, so religion is a core pillar of the community. The town plays host to two major temples, one to Pharasma and the other to Daikitsu. In addition to these deities, a long list of deities have shrines in the town. I've listed those deities here, and moments to worship any or all of them will occur throughout the campaign. I encourage players to pause the video here and familiarize themselves with this list. If you want your character to be devoted to a single deity, a few options present themselves. Followers of deities of death can easily connect with the recurring themes of the unquiet dead and restless spirits. Pharasma is the most obvious choice here, but Skio is equally relevant to the plot, and his greater emphasis on understanding might lead to less violent encounters with disturbed spirits. Deities who encourage their followers to live in harmony with their community and the nature around them will also be a great choice for this campaign. Daikitsu, with her emphasis on the observation of the seasons, is a standout option, but Ketefis is a good option as well. Followers of Abadar or Shizuru could also feel strong motivation to protect their community from external threats. Kijon, with his emphasis on the spreading of knowledge and the protection and healing of others, is a fantastic choice for this campaign, and medicine and alchemy are deeply respected in Willowshore and in broader Shenmen as a whole. Finally, Nalinivati, as a goddess of magic and parenthood, might be a solid thematic, if unconventional, choice. Nalinivati is also the patron of the Nagaji, who have a small presence in Willowshore, and she maintains a close relationship with Daikitsu. Offerings to Nalinivati might occasionally be made by Daikitsu's followers. There is a tradition among religious folk in Willowshore which is unique to the town. Because of the tale of Ji Hui and her creation of the Eternal Lantern, many citizens believe it is possible to earn the favor of the gods by offering a small handful of copper coins at deific shrines in town. For this reason, copper coins can be found as offerings at nearly all shrines in town, with some regularity. Before I wrap this section up, I should expand a bit on the non-deific philosophy of Songpochi. Songpochi is a philosophy which centers on the examination of the cycle of reincarnation. It is adjacent to religion in the sense that many practitioners incorporate it into their own religious beliefs, alongside worship of conventional deities. Songpochi teaches the concept of the river of life, a path which souls can follow, which serves as a sort of intentional detour from the traditional river of souls. The river of life is ultimately circular. It takes up souls which depart living vessels as they die and deposits them into new bodies, as they are being made or born, in a cycle of reincarnation. The nature of reincarnation in Songpochi is a complicated thing, and this is best expressed through the internal disagreements within the philosophy itself. There are three dominant schools of thought within Songpochi. The first is the Heavens Path, whose adherents believe that the gods judge the lives of mortals and determine what their next lives should be. The Earthly Path teaches that a soul's next life is determined by the consequences of one's actions, a cause and effect relationship which involves no arbitrary judgment whatsoever. Finally, the Traveler's Path teaches followers to commune with the natural world, rather than focusing on the philosophical questions of reincarnation. Many practitioners take a balanced approach between the three paths, recognizing the inherent randomness of which vessel your soul might find upon reincarnating. At the same time, these practitioners also believe that a life well lived can increase one's chances of being born into a good or pleasant life. That said, not everyone agrees that being born into a pleasant or fortunate life is ultimately a good thing, as someone who is born into the nobility might become pampered or spoiled, and thus abandon their empathy for the poor or the less fortunate. Many master sages who practice the teachings of Songpochi instead take the view that each life incarnation is a chance for the soul to be tested and refined, and that the complexity of quantifying whether or not a soul passed that test is far beyond mortal understanding. For more information on Songpochi, there is a detailed write-up in Book 2 of Season of Ghosts. Feel free to check it out, just clear it with your GM beforehand. Like all Pathfinder campaigns, Season of Ghosts provides players with a set of campaign-specific backgrounds to tie their characters to the setting and the themes of the story. By comparison to other APs, the narrative-forward nature of this campaign puts special emphasis on the importance of character backgrounds, however. As such, the 6 backgrounds provided here are especially detailed and meaningful. Each of the 6 background options also provides a mechanical bonus called a seasonal boon, a special action PCs can take once per season. Additionally, the campaign provides a method for further customizing your background by adjusting it with deeper detail on the status of your family. Finally, PCs are expected to choose the location of their home in town, as well as a family heirloom which they possess. I'll dig into all of those options at the end of this section. The Close Ties background represents characters with a deep connection to one of the named NPCs in the player's guide. I haven't covered any in this video to save the runtime, but if this background appeals to you, I suggest working with your GM to identify the NPC with whom your character has a relationship. The nature of this relationship is yours to define. It might be a master-apprentice relationship, a budding romance, a friendship from childhood, or anything else, so long as it is generally positive. You've spent a great deal of time sharing tea with your chosen NPC, and have picked up some of their professional skills as a result. In addition to trained proficiency in tea lore and diplomacy, you gain the Specialty Crafting feat in the area of specialty associated with your chosen NPC. Your seasonal boon allows you to bump an NPC's opinion of your party from friendly to helpful once per season. The Folklore Enthusiast background represents characters who've developed something of an obsession with the folktales and legends in Willowshore and the surrounding hinterlands. In particular, you've noticed a connection between the stories passed around the community and the art which artists in the town produce and have produced for years. You suspect there might be some deeper history which has been largely forgotten over the years, but which has led to the development of many of the stories you've heard growing up. In addition to trained proficiency in art lore and the religion skill, you gain the Oddity Identification skill feat. Your seasonal boon allows you to roll a knowledge check in the open, rather than have the GM roll it secretly, and increases the degree of success on that check by 1 step. The Northridge Scholar background represents characters who belong to the Northridge political faction. Your focus lies on the expansion of Willowshore and its development as a trading hub. You have a strong personal interest in the development of a school in Willowshore as a means for the citizens of the town to improve themselves. In addition to being trained in academia lore and society, you gain the Additional Lore feat in a lore subcategory of your choosing. Work with your GM to work out a lore which makes sense and will be useful. Your seasonal boon allows you to further increase your standing with the Northridge faction when you would normally gain 1 reputation point with them. The Outskirt Dweller background represents characters who find even the small town of Willowshore to be too crowded for their taste. You feel a strong connection to the natural world, and live your day-to-day life surrounded by the woodlands outside of Willowshore proper. Despite your relative isolation, you hold no ill will towards those who dwell in town, and even have a few notable friends with whom you are on good terms, those being at least a few of the other PCs. In addition to trained proficiency in hunting lore and the nature skill, you gain the Terrain Expertise skill feat in forested terrain. Your seasonal boon allows you to gain a circumstance bonus to an initiative roll, which you can then share with your party members. The Southbank Traditionalist background represents characters who belong to the Southbank political faction. You have a connection to Willowshore's history and traditions, likely because of your long family history in the town. You likely have some connection to farming or construction, either through your own work or the work of your relatives, and also likely have a deep love of storytelling. In addition to trained proficiency in crafting and farming lore, you gain the Hobnobber skill feat. Your seasonal boon allows you to further increase your standing with the Southbank faction, when you would normally gain 1 reputation point with them. The Willow Shore Urchin background represents characters who, for one reason or another, grew up on Willow Shore's streets. You might have been homeless, or simply been avoiding returning to an unhealthy home life. Either way, your childhood required a lot from you: strength of body, quickness of mind, and mastery of charm. Whether or not you are still living on the streets is up to you, but even if you aren't, the lessons from your childhood remain with you to this day. In addition to gaining trained proficiency in engineering lore and the athletics skill, you gain the Charming Liar skill feat. Your seasonal boon allows you or an adjacent PC to forego rolling a recovery check and instead gain a critical success. That covers the 6 base backgrounds from which players can choose, but the campaign also provides information on further customizing your background by detailing your character's familial status. While this mechanic isn't necessary, I do suggest players consider it as another method of connecting their characters to each other and the story. The family background adjustment must be selected by at least 2 PCs, as it represents characters who are members of the same family and are very close as a result. This background adjustment allows characters to further define their relationship within their family by choosing from a list of 3 relationship categories: bickering, close-knit, or typical. Both PCs must choose the same relationship category. Bickering PCs fight with one another constantly and revel in each other's struggles. When these characters witness their siblings critically fail an attack roll or skill check, they gain a bonus to their saves for 1 minute as a result. This replaces the skill feat PCs would normally get from their unadjusted background. Close-knit PCs are on good terms and always stand up to help one another. The DC for these characters to administer first aid to one another is 5 lower than normal. This, too, replaces the skill feat PCs would normally get from their unadjusted background. PCs defined by a typical familial relationship receive no mechanical adjustment to their background as a result of their familial connections. This background adjustment is purely story-based. By contrast to the family background adjustment, the foundling background adjustment represents characters who were not born in Willowshore, but grew up in the town from a young age. These characters might have been adopted by a family in Willowshore, or might have simply been abandoned in the town by their caregivers, who moved on without them. Foundlings can choose from 3 broad categories to define their relationship to the town. Bitter foundlings likely have a good relationship with a few people in Willowshore and have an appreciation for the town as a whole, but still harbor resentment for the circumstances which forced them to lose their birth family. You gain the Intimidating Glare skill feat. This replaces the skill feat normally gained by your background. Mysterious foundlings hide the details of their past and rarely open up to others. Instead, you've learned a lot about life in Willowshore through observation from a safe distance. You gain the Streetwise skill feat. This also replaces the skill feat normally granted by your background. Outgoing foundlings are grateful to the community which has welcomed them with open arms, and always seek to repay that kindness to the best of their ability. Once per week, when you undertake a downtime activity which benefits Willowshore as a whole, you may convert a failure on the associated skill check to a success, or a critical failure to a failure. This also replaces the skill feat normally granted by your background. And believe it or not, we are still not done with the character background information for this campaign. Each PC is expected to have a specific home in the town of Willowshore. To accomplish this, you should work with your GM to examine the Willowshore map and determine which otherwise unmarked building is your home. Your background typically informs this choice. Close Ties PC typically live near their chosen NPC companion. Folklore enthusiasts typically live near the religious shrine of the most significance to their characters. Northridge scholars typically live on the north bank of the Seba River. Outskirts dwellers typically live either on the edges of the town proper or in a home in the woods, which might not be marked on the map. South Bank traditionalists mostly live on the south bank of the Seba River. Last but not least, Willowshore urchins might still be homeless, or might be squatting in an otherwise unoccupied building, or might have finally found themselves housed in one of the other buildings in town if they've escaped homelessness. Finally, all PCs in this campaign have access to a piece of treasure or a collection of treasures called their heirloom. This represents either the wealth your character has worked for over several years, the goods they've set aside to aid them in their working life, or a set of goods passed down from older generations. All PCs should select different heirlooms from the list I'm about to describe, unless there are more than 4 PCs, in which case there can be duplicates. PCs can choose from 2 minor healing potions and 1 other piece of common adventuring gear worth less than 2 gold pieces, 1 predictable silver piece and a dose of oil of potency, supplies for an alarm snare, 10 silver pieces and a pair of lesser ghost charges, or 1 chunk of cold iron worth 10 gold pieces. And that concludes all the mechanical choices players can make regarding their background in Season of Ghosts. This is by far the most detail Paizo has ever put into the background system in an AP, and I strongly suggest players take advantage of it in Season of Ghosts to ensure their characters have a meaningful connection to the town. Well, if you still want to play the Season of Ghosts adventure path, that should be enough to get you started. If you and your group decide this AP is for you, I strongly suggest that your GM read the Player's Guide and the AP first, then decide how much of the Player's Guide they're comfortable with the players reading. This AP is a fantastic example of the strong narratives which tabletop RPGs can create, and I fully recommend it to any group of players who want to lean into strong roleplay and character immersion. It is one of the best APs Paizo has ever produced, and I look forward to hearing the community talk about it for years to come. Alright, so this was the last normal video in my production schedule for 2024. But that doesn't mean that I'm just done for the year and taking a break. Oh no. I've been here on YouTube for just over a year now, and I figure it's time to celebrate that. So, in the month of December, I've got a little something special planned for y'all. I want to keep it a bit of a surprise, but here's a little hint I've put together. On the first day of Christmas, Pathfinder gave to me a wizard who spoke as Lanty. See you next time.